You see, I've been very blessed in the teachers that I've had, that they were like the best. That was just good karma. I had seen Krushna Chandra Nayak perform probably when he got the SNA award. And then I knew he was teaching because they'd given the grant to Bhartikala Kendra for him to teach and choreograph Chhau-based ballets for their company. And they had professional dancers, but they were mostly trained in Kathak and folk dance, and they do every year Ram Leela, Krishna Leela. So he was choreographing. And there was always some controversy about, is he diluting the form by doing this choreography for not fully trained dancers? Some would be okay. And he was a marvelous teacher. I mean, he lived and breathed the dance. He told the story that when he was newly married, his wife was scared out of her wits because she woke up and she saw these boot-like shadows on the wall, and it was, he had gotten up, he had an idea, and he was dancing. And, that was her husband, right? That he was dancing like that, and she was like, there's a boot, it's like, all these things. So I had studied with him, and then, as I said, 75. 76, when I went to Baripada, he said, you have to dance to show them, I want them to see what you can do. I said, Guruji, please, I'm not ready. I will definitely make mistakes, and it will reflect on you. And he said, no, it's fine, you dance. And I danced. It was very difficult because I danced for the first time on uneven ground outside. It wasn't on a stage or a classroom. It was just on the dirt. And all of the balancing and all of the things and, with stones and pebbles and earth and everything, but I did. And many years later, someone from Bengal said to me they had visited Baripada and they had seen girls being trained. And they said, that's interesting, you're training girls. And they said, yes, one American came and we saw that, yes, girls can be trained. And so I was very happy about that. And he was a brilliant teacher. And then when there was a very important festival of Indian classical dance and traditional theater in Padatik, and people came from all over the world, and all of the different styles were represented. Actually, this was in the 80s. This would have been in the mid-80s, because I had gone to Saraikela in 81 and had started learning Chhau. So my training in Chhau is Mayurbhanj Chhau, but learning some dances in Saraikela was easy because the technique is easier. So I already had Chhau technique, and there's some variations on how you do your basic ooflies and ooflies and things, but learning the dance was fine. So what happened in that festival was that, ironically, in the performances, the Saraikela guru, Kelucharan Sahu, had me perform a Chhau piece. And I discovered later that this created a huge uproar because the foreigners who had come, the scholars, they want to be, as foreigners, those who have access to understanding the informants, the dancers. They're the ones who will learn about it, and then they will interpret it in the West. The performers, they're all very keen to get the golden ticket and go abroad and perform. So, for the foreigners, if they're insecure, they feel diminished that someone who's also a foreigner can master the technique and be the informant. That's very uncomfortable. They don't want that. It's like they need to be the intermediary between the artist who's inarticulate. And then for the Indian artists, they want to be the one to go abroad. They want the foreigners who are coming to take them. They don't want that a foreigner can also do what they do. So it was a very interesting situation to be in, but I was sorry that it displeased so many people, and this happened multiple times over the years. But anyway, Kelucharan Sahu actually had me perform with the Chhau troupe, whereas Mayurbhanj Chhau, which really, was even closer to my heart, and that he had been denied the opportunity to let me be the representative there. And then there was one time when I worked with Gopal Dubey, and we brought dancers from Mayurbhanj to Saraikela, and I worked for 2 months, and I created a production because ICCR had said when groups go abroad, they do items, and it isn't as polished as it can be for presentation abroad. So I created a production called Jivan Rekha, and what I did was I made it a theatrical whole without in any way changing the art. And the way I did it was, I decided the dances can be divided into dances about human life, shikari, boatman, like this. And then there are dances that are about nature. And then there are dances about the divine, about gods. So these 3 different sections. And then what I did was, I created in such a way that, like for nature, I took, for instance, in Saraikela, you have a bumblebee, you have a mayur, you have a flower, you have certain animals. And having all of those individual dances woven together as one composition. So that you're getting this, and then this, and then this, but they're all doing the correct traditional thing, but it makes a whole. And then I choreographed a piece, Nari, a woman, and it's basically using the technique that you've learned where it's like the life of a woman. So you've got all the basic chalis, where you're picking up cow dung, sprinkling the water, plastering the mud, all the basic techniques. So I had all of these techniques. A woman, how she goes out, she does these things, she takes the bath, she does her hair, she does her alapana and everything. And then the natki, which is the climax, right? What is the climax for a woman in this scenario? It's playing with the child. So she feeds the child and then dancing with the child. And then for this production, I added in Dandi, the brahmachari, so that he comes and he does his dance. He's Dandi and he comes in, and then he comes and he asks for alms from the nari, and the nari gives it to him, and he does, so that, it had a thread with it. And this production was done at Kamani Auditorium, and it was also done for Doordarshan. Doordarshan National Program of Dance is only for classical dance. The director asked me, after I had done some successful production, he said, "Oh, what would you like to do?" And then I thought, I can easily do like an Odissi program. I said, but this is an opportunity to put Chhau into a national broadcast, because otherwise it doesn't come into the category. It's not ranked. Folk dance couldn't be there. So we did it for Doordarshan, although it was not well produced. And we did it at Kamani. After the performance at Kamani, I actually had gone back to the States for a few months, and I discovered that there was a big hue and cry that Chhau was being presented for the first time in a proper theater. And why did a foreigner get to do that? And that was wonderful, because then the government responded by then sponsoring and bringing Chhau troops to perform. Before that, they would be invited at the trade fair, and they would dance in front of the Tata steel pavilion, and they'd be in front and they'd be doing their thing. But they hadn't had a proscenium presentation. So that was nice.
This troupe comes from Mayurbhanj only? So the people came from...
No, Saraikela and Mayurbhanj was joined.
Both.
I did both. Mm-hmm. So, and it was like, for instance, Shikari. Both Mayurbhanj and Saraikela have a hunter, Shikari. It's a solo. I had both solo dancers performing at the same time. We did have to, obviously, make a slight modification in the music, because they both have to be dancing to the same music. Mm-hmm. But that wasn't a huge, shift. And so both of them are dancing at the same time. So you're seeing this Shikari doing this, and that Shikari doing that, this one, checking the tiger pug marks, and this one doing that, this one making his pawn. And one thing that was very amusing when we started rehearsing is that these two solo dancers would bump into each other, because they had no sense of stage space. They had always just gone and done whatever they did. And so they had to learn how to be aware of where you are in space. And there were a whole lot of things that they learned. It was a wonderful experience. Then after that, a year or two later, again I spent a summer in Saraikela. Again we brought the dancers from Mayurbhanj. And then I did a production for Doordarshan, Ashoka.
Mm-hmm.
So it was about Ashoka, and then you've got Buddha and Yashoda and all of that we did with the troops, and that was very nice. Then after that, I didn't go back again to spend a whole summer, for various reasons, time and stuff. The other thing in terms, another experience with Chhau was in 1978, there was the Asian Dance Festival in Hawaii, organized by the American Dance Guild and the, whatever it's called, the Conference of Dance Scholars.
Mm-hmm.
So they had dancers from all over. And I had just come back from India after 5 years. And so it was in Hawaii. And so I went to California briefly, and then I went to Hawaii and attended. And I performed 2 dances. I performed Manipuri Ras, and I performed Nataraj in Mayurbhanj Chhau. Now, when I performed the Nataraj in Chhau, no one had ever seen or heard of Chhau before. And Betty and Clifford Jones, who were very eminent dance scholars who had spent years in the South, were experts on Bharatanatyam and very knowledgeable about Indian dance. They had never seen Chhau, because Chhau had been seen in the 30s. There was a heyday. They had gone to Europe, but then post-war, and then after that, there was like no knowledge. So they had never, ever seen anything like it. And when they saw me perform, you could understand, looking at a dancer wearing a tiger skin and doing all of these things, they thought it's a khichdi, that it's like I'm a modern dancer and I've made up like, Uday Shankar kind of a thing. Fortunately, Mohan Kokar and Sunil Kothari were there. And they said, this is a style, and she's doing it correctly. So that was it. So basically that means that I introduced Chhau into North America, or all of the Americas for that matter. It had never been seen before. And then later, in Los Angeles, they have an annual mask festival. Mm-hmm. There's a mask museum, and they had a dance festival. I guess maybe this was the 80s. I can't remember. A couple of times I had danced. I know what. No, I know what. That's correct. In 78, when I came back, I was in San Diego. That's when I did Mayurbhanj Chhau there. And while I was in California, from 78 to 81, the longest I was in the States, I danced in this mask dance festival, but I did Mayurbhanj Chhau and Manipuri, because those came within their parameter. But I felt, let me do a mask dance. When I went back to India in 81, I went to Saraikela to learn mask dance so that I could do it in the mask festival there. And then I danced, there was the Olympic Arts Festival. They had the Olympics in Los Angeles. And that time I danced Saraikela Chhau for the mask festival. That was very nice. And then I used to tour and perform, and I would, for a number of years, I would do like a program, half Manipuri, half Odissi, sometimes Manipuri, Odissi, and then also one or two Chhau pieces. But it became very difficult to have so many costumes, trunks full, and then the setup time to prepare to do the quick change. It took me like 2 hours just to set everything so that I could do it all. And then I also had a daughter in tow, and between Ross costumes and masks and diaper bags, I said, until I'm at a level where there are stagehands to help, it's too much, and I'm just going to keep it simple, Whereas when you're doing Odissi, you have one costume and you change, and you can. The other thing too is when you're in a theater, when the program ends, they want you out, and it took me like an hour to pack everything up, and if I didn't do it carefully, these delicate things would get damaged, the Manipuri particularly. So I was like, okay, I'm not, at that kind of a level where there's helpers and this and that and everything. So then I stopped doing that. But I did Chhau many times for national television and performances, and also Gopal Dubey and I used to do sometimes duets. We would do Ratri and things like that for different things, gradually over the years. And
Sharon, do you remember, I just wanted to ask you about different teachers. So you met so many eminent persons. How could you distinguish between the technique, Chhau technique? So what about your Guruji Nayak? And suppose can you compare it to Kedarnath Sahu and Lingarajacharya? As far as I know, these names, in Chhau. So what is the difference, basically? How would you describe it? Because we don't say there are another styles apart from Mayurbhanj, Chhau, Seraikela, Chhau, Purulia, Chhau. But even inside what we call the styles, there are certain approaches or whatever. So
Well,
what
you
is your
see,
idea?
in the Mayurbhanj Chhau, dancers like my guru and some of the others, although they were knowledgeable about the repertoire, in terms of this annual competition, they would tend to specialize in a few dances. So that, for instance, Dandi, that was one of the specialties of my guru. Mahadev, Nataraj. Whereas when I went to Seraikela, Madan Mohan Lenka, he was famous for the bear. And also Hara Parvati. And Madan Lenka, was Shiva. Mm-hmm. And now Sri Hari Nayak, mm-hmm. who was smaller and younger, he would be Sita. Mm-hmm. And
Kedarnath Sahu, what was his
Kedarnath Sahu, okay, that's Seraikela. Seraikela, he was a partner to the prince. So he did many of the female roles, like Chandrabhaga and stuff, and the night and the moon and stuff. Mm-hmm. And in Seraikela, I would say that Guru Kedarnath Sahu was the most knowledgeable, mm-hmm. With the best training. And but as I said, I only discovered when I organized the seminar that even though he was knowledgeable and could do in the same way, you specialize. And he would not have done the compositions that had like the fighting and the battles. There were other guys who were trained for that.
Mm-hmm. But who did a grammar of today's Seraikela or Mayurbhanj Chhau? Because as far as I know, as far as I saw the class, apart from the Chali, which could be quite old items, because Chali could be, we could trace it maybe till time immemorial, okay. But what about these small items, like hand movement, feet movement? So who choreographed it in a sense? Now we know.
You see, first of all, it's not that old. It's not time immemorial. You see, the zamindars in mm-hmm. British times, mm-hmm. they had their private armies, their pikas. So when the British banned that, then they said, we don't have an army, we have a dance troupe. So they kept their Paika soldiers, and now they added music, so they maintained their training. They maintained their martial arts training, but now they're doing it with music. So now it's a dance, it's a martial arts dance.
When it was done? When the shift?
Well, that's the shift. I mean, you could look it up. When did the British ban private armies mm-hmm. in eastern India, in what was Bengal province or whatever it was called?
So that was a key point.
They banned. I mean, before that, they wouldn't have necessarily had the men dancing. They would have had Nachni, right? They would have had, the women dancing. Mm-hmm. You had that. And of course, there was the Gotipura dance, mm-hmm. which was going on. But
who created the grammar of?
So the grammar they took from their Paika training, from their martial arts training, and then they evolved it. And mm-hmm. I couldn't say offhand, although I could look it up. There might be some references, but I'm not mm-hmm. sure mm-hmm. about how. But one thing is, you see, when they evolved their grammar, mm-hmm. whichever gurus did that, they said they took the things from daily life, right? So each and every ufli is like something from daily life. How you clean the toe rings, how the crane jumps. So each one is like that, and they've taken a movement, and they've got all of these things, and that evolved. And I would imagine that as the teams developed, you see, then they've got gurus, then the gurus are developing the grammar, developing the training. I remember my guru said that they had to go onto the beach, onto the sand every morning, and for an hour they would go step hop on the sand to build stamina and strength and ability, right? So they developed, just like Godipura has its exercises and grammar, they developed their training and their vocabulary, and then they kept working on it. You see, kept refining, because they're completely supported by they've gotten land and everything. You know, they're paid court dancers, you could say, right? And now the notes of like who did exactly these things and the names, those might be in the papers of a great scholar who passed away, Tori Babu was his nickname. LN something. Because I remember when I met him, this was one of these fabulous, mad scholar types who literally couldn't afford paper to write on. Paper was so precious to even get to write notes. But like he was collecting in knowledge, and his papers are there in Baripada. And you know, see, I have limitations of language, and there's also time. How much? I mean, I didn't go and live there and speak and study, so I don't have like all of that. Although in the seminar there might be some names, but again, that was in Odia. I got it transcribed, and I need to sometime get around to getting a better transcription of it, and then maybe publishing some of that. Okay, so border crossings. I would say after I'd been in India for 5 years, and I had gone back in between to teach at University of Michigan as a visiting professor, to teach Manipuri, which I'd been studying, and to present Odissi in my concert, even though I just had a workshop. After 5 years, I felt that I needed to go back to my own country to see what I could do with the art, so that it wasn't like a poet printing their own poetry as a vanity. Was my dance self-indulgence that was personal? Could I do something that justified more? So that was a border point. When I went back, I was in Southern California. Because of my background in puppetry, I met puppeteers at a conference. They told me there was funding for cross-cultural education. I auditioned a show. I wound up doing 50 lecture demonstration performances of Odissi Manipuri in the schools of Los Angeles, 50 in 5 weeks, twice a year. So I actually was earning a living, basically, with my lecture demonstrations. And each performance was minimum 300 children. And so I did 250 shows. Then I also was teaching, and I had some significant performances and concerts. I actually wore out a costume. Then I said, okay, now I can justify going back to learn more. Then I came American Institute of Indian Studies Smithsonian Fellowship.
In which years it was?
I came back in 81. So I had come in 73 as a Fulbright scholar. I was supposed to come in 72, no visas because of Bangladesh war. That meant that I finished my master's degree in dance, so that allowed me to not have to return after my grant, to extend it. So my Fulbright was extended and renewed for 2 years. Then I took a job at the American School for 3 years. Now, when I came back in 81, I came back to continue Manipuri, Odissi, and Chhau, with the intention that whichever teachers are available, generous, I will put my emphasis there. I also decided that I could afford to be pregnant on fellowship. So I planned 2 weeks before I left, and I did a tour in Indonesia, Astis and Askis, Bali, Java, was confirmed it was in India. Okay, but now turning points. So, one significant turning point was then when my daughter was school age. I had to decide where to be. I had never intended, obviously, to stay in India and be a classical dancer. That would have been stupid. But every time I performed, people changed their minds, and opportunities came. Mm-hmm. Nothing ever came through the normal effort that artists make to get it. Mm-hmm. I mean, I discovered if I wrote a letter, which I did once, to a sponsor, I get back a scathing response. How dare you, have the nerve to write to me? How do I know he's in love with the artist that he sponsors? And I don't know these things. Okay. Because people did not take foreigners seriously. It was very lucky to be on a Fulbright. Otherwise, you're considered a hippie and dope smoking and whatever. Okay. So one turning point was I decided I have to be in one place for my daughter's education. I can't even do a residency at a university. And so the reason I decided to stay in India, as long as I was welcome and doing something worthwhile, is, number one, I needed to have live musicians. Number two, I'm not a self-motivator. I need to have the energy around me. There's no rush. When I would go home, my practice would be mechanical. Number three, my colleagues from university were all lead dancers in major companies. If I went back to America and focused on Indian classical dance, I would be tangential. You're doing an art form that's tangential. And basically, if I was lucky, I would be able to maintain what I had achieved. But it would not be possible to grow. If I stayed in India, there are the opportunities where you are asked to perform in certain occasions, certain places, certain languages, Tan Santiago Raja Festival, Kerala, whatever. So then you create new work for where you're going. So the opportunity to create, to have the musicians. The challenge is to be creating for a reason, because I've never ever created anything just for novelty or to make something new. It's always been to meet a need. And another thing was that in India, whatever prejudice people might have or stereotypes about foreigners, there were enough people that were knowledgeable enough of the art, that trusted their own judgment, that when they saw a performance, they were ready to change their mind. So that when the director of ICCR saw my performance, he said, I will send musicians with you on tour if you organize a tour. And that's how I was able, with my guru, Padma Vibhushan, or Kelucharan Mohapatra, with Bhubaneswar Mishra, who composed much of the music for Odissi, Rakal Mohanty, brilliant singer, and Shibu Ratikant Mohapatra, my guru's son. I was able to take them. I could never have ever gotten such support by asking, and I had absolutely nothing in the feudal hierarchical society that was necessary. I did not have a father connected, brothers, husband, sugar daddy, anybody that would make anybody give anything except on merit. And in India, actually, that happened. On the other hand, in the United States, if I, for instance, went to the Smithsonian, where they did sponsor classical Indian and other Asian arts, the response was immediately, oh, we would never present a foreigner doing Indian classical dance. And I said, so you're saying you have no ability to judge the quality of the art. You go by skin color. It's a purely racist decision. But the thing is that they do not have that confidence to be able to judge. And so they're going by racism. Mm-hmm. And so for me to have been in the U.S., the acceptance could not have been there. Although, I mean, there are times when I would perform and like people would say like, I know authentic when I see it. Because people see things from all over the world, you know quality. Mm-hmm. My sponsor for my next two tours was the person who brought all the greatest artists, musicians of India, never dancers, musicians of India to the U.S. Zakir Hussain said, I can't believe Dr. Dixit's doing your tour. Mm-hmm. But he did, for whatever reason. Okay, so that was one turning point. Another borderline. 15 years. So if I came in 73, 15 years would be what? Whatever it is. It seemed to me at the 15-year mark, there was like a change of position day and night. In the first 15 years, I found that gradually as I met artists, dancers, people were always very friendly. And Indians generally were very appreciative that a foreigner wants to take an interest in their culture. I avoided the first few years taking programs where it was only to see the novelty, because I knew that my art wouldn't measure up until I was a little more ready. It's sort of like she walks, she talks, she does Odissi dance, you know, like look at this monkey. Right? Okay. First 15 years, the art world, the dancers were friendly, and the general connoisseurs of dance were like, that's nice. 15 years, things changed. The Indian
80s,
public.
80s or 90s?
Well, okay,
90s.
so it's like I came in 73, 83. Okay, by 88. Well, you see, in 1990, when I organized my first Videshi Kalakar Utsav, if I said to anybody, I'm organizing a festival of foreign artists, they would say, oh, how lovely, foreign students. No one connected foreign with being an artist. You could be a student. You could not be an artist. And literally before me, there was John Higgins, who did classical music, Carnatic music. There was Louise Lightfoot, who studied Manipuri. There was Indrani Raman's mother, Esther Sherman, who became Ragini Devi. I mean, that was it. There was Ragini Devi. Then later there was John Higgins. Then there was me. I mean, that people knew, actually respected as an artist. Martha, I've seen her performance doing Yakshagana, and it was excellent. The combination of both the period that she did it and that it's like she could find a space academically to do a lecture demonstration about Yakshagana, to be talking about an art form and to show a dance. But she wasn't able to find a place on the performance stage. It's many things. It's also how many Indians were where, what were the performance opportunities, place and location. But I've always felt that if she had been a little bit later, she would be known as a performing artist as well as a scholar. Okay, but the avenues were too limited for her at that time. So, as I said, at 15 years, what happened was the connoisseurs, the rasikas of dance, and the general public acknowledged, accepted, and celebrated my being a top performing artist of Indian classical dance. What that meant was that I wasn't good for a foreigner, and I was no longer called American blah blah blah. I was simply Sharon Lowen, and I was a respected dancer. And then the bonus after that 15 years was that people found it more interesting to see a fine artist who clearly has overcome and crossed bridges and hurdles that were not there for the other artists in my same category. So I literally have filing cabinets filled with reviews and press and articles. Filing cabinets, so much, because it's interesting.
15 years in between 80s, 82 and 90?
I mean, I was building my career then,
Sometimes.
you see. From 82, I was performing. I came back in 81. The longest I was out was 3 years. Then I was performing. 85, 86, they went with me to the States. I performed in South Africa. I did a return AIIS tour around India. I performed many places. That's when K. Vishwanath saw me on morning TV, and he decided that I would be the inspiration for his heroine in his Telugu film, so that there isn't a person in Andhra Pradesh that hasn't seen my film multiple times. So by, around 77, 78 and everything, I was at the top in a way, and lots and lots of stuff. And so the others switched. At that point, maybe 14 years, maybe it was like 86, when I came back from my tour of the U.S. with the great guru as my Mardala accompanist, that is when the dance community turned around and decided that I really had to be eliminated. Because there was no more a sense of, fine, you're doing nice, you're a dancer. But it was important that I should be destroyed. Very important, right?
How it was done?
How it was done many ways. Letters were written to ICCR, to all the government agencies, saying that I was a spy, I'm a CIA agent, I'm a smuggler. I heard was that I organized women for members of parliament in Kerala. I don't know where that came from. And how dare I be able to get a tour abroad and everything. And I was blacklisted from some things. I was not from other things. I remember there was one woman, wonderful woman, who was head of ICCR. She said, I've been in business. She's a foreign service, but she usually was in commerces. She said, I've never seen such dirty politics as this in the arts. She handled it by saying, I won't give comments to the press. I just tell my people all the protocols have been followed, there's nothing wrong. And then it wasn't news, then it didn't go into the press. If a dancer knew, if I told a musician naively, oh wow, I'm going to have a tour of 20 shows in this state because somebody saw me and they want to do it, they would evaporate. Why? Because the musician would tell a dancer, who would then contact them and like stop it. Or they would contact people and say, you don't want her, she's this, she's that, she's not Hindu. And so evaporations would sort of dry up. And then there was a point when actually I was really frightened that real damage would be done to me. And at that point, I just kind of withdrew, you know. Because the thing is that I'm really lucky. I'm dancing because people invite me and because I love it. I'm not ambitious. I see, one thing that's very lucky, as a foreigner, there's no entitlement. There's no sense of entitlement. So many people have all of this nakra, all of these vanities. To me, if I'm dancing and villagers are crying because of how moved they are, that's better than a jeweled necklace. That I, from my background, from my culture, can be the informant, can be the interpreter, can bring to life things for people. I don't care that the stage is rocky or that the green room isn't secure. You know, I'm not going to be like, I deserve this and that and the other thing. So, I mean, there's no sense of entitlement. In terms of ambition, I hoped when I stayed on, when my daughter was school age, that when I went back to America, that at least I would not just be seen as, okay, what is it you do? Belly dance, huh? You know, I would like to go back at least at a level with some level of recognition. And so what I've achieved, in spite of all of the things that are preventative and dampening, is just beyond possibility of expectation. And then I would say at this point, in terms of borderlines, in a modern India, where young people are not exposed to their tradition and their Sanskriti, I am not just another old auntie saying, you should value your own tradition, don't get carried away with Western stuff. I'm speaking as someone who is from there, represents whatever is transnational, and that when I say you need to know your own myth, and you need to you will understand yourself through understanding the other, and by doing the other, you need to understand yourself. All of these things, I'm saying it have a special role. As someone who is promoting, interpreting Indian culture, but who's come from outside. So that's another level of respect. So that's nice too. And another thing that's inspiring, because somebody told me once, one girl from National School of Drama kept my picture under her pillow when she went to Bombay, is that they know that somehow or other I made a career, successful career, without compromise of values, and without having to have the backing. So that inspires young, naive artists to say, maybe if I work hard, I can achieve without having what this one and that one and that one has. My family aren't artists, and my family isn't rich, and I'm not this, but it's like, look at her. She came from outside and she did it, right? So it's always hard. So that's it.